Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go. Hello and welcome to today's DNS session. We are going to have a discussion on today's newspaper, The Hindu, Delhi edition dated 24 September 2021. We shall pick up articles important for civil service examination and discuss them as per the demand of the exam. There is an article on page number 5. PM Cares is not government fund. Centre has told this to Delhi High Court. The central government has submitted an affidavit in Delhi High Court after it was seeked by the court in response to a petition filed in the court pleading the court to declare PM Cares as a public authority under Right to Information Act. First of all, let's look at the response of the central government that would have been included in the affidavit submitted to the Delhi High Court. The content of affidavit as such should not be known, but the argument of the central government is known as to why it thinks that PM Cares should not come under RTI Act. Central government is of the opinion that PM Care Fund is not fund of the Government of India and the amount is not credited to Consolidated Fund of India because PM Cares Fund has been registered as a charitable trust. It has not been created by the constitution or by legislation by the central or the state government. There is also an issue of participation of Under Secretary in management of the fund. But the central government opines that despite being an officer of the central government, the Under Secretary was permitted to discharge his function in the PM Cares Trust on the honorary basis without any remuneration, which of course by law is permitted. There were also issues related to the Board of Trustees of PM Cares Fund, which includes Prime Minister, Defence Minister, Finance Minister, Home Minister. But the government is of the opinion that composition of the Board of Trustees can never be determinative factor to ascertain whether the respondent is a public authority or not. We'll come to this point in a while. I'm just reading out the government's stand on the issue. You hear it very carefully. So even if Secretary to the Government of India or Prime Minister and other ministers, they are part of Board of Trustees, it does not mean that this would imply that the trust will be a public authority under Section 2H of the RTI Act. Further, the government has said that PM Cares already function with transparency. The fund is audited by an auditor who is a chartered accountant drawn from the panel prepared by the CAG of India. Previously, the office of CAG has made it clear that CAG will not be auditing PM Cares Fund because it's a trust getting donations from private individuals. But for some purposes, CAG do prepare a list of CAs, chartered accountants. And the auditor for PM Cares is chosen from that list given by CAG. The audited report is also put on the official website. So on the merit of these points, the government has an opinion that irrespective of whether the trust was a state or other authority within the meaning of Article 12 of the Constitution, or whether it was public authority within the meaning of provision of Right to Information Act, it was not permissible to disclose third-party information. There are three things in this point that renders it important to understand meaning of public authority. For your exam, especially for the prelims exam, you must also understand the difference between state and public authority. Then you have to ponder upon the inference that the Government of India has drawn that even if that PM Cares Trust is declared as a state under Article 12 of the Constitution or public authority under RTI Act, still it may not disclose third-party information, meaning who gave the fund and for what purpose it was utilized. We'll try to open up the threads and have a holistic discussion on this, but before that, I'll just quickly give you certain pointers for the prelims examination. First and foremost, PM Care Fund has been registered as a charitable trust. It was registered in 2020. At least remember the year. UPSC has got into the habit of mentioning year in the statements. PM Cares Fund can actually avail donation from foreign contribution as well. And donation to fund can avail 100% tax exemption. The purpose is to provide relief and assistance of any kind in any public emergency or any calamity or distress. You must know that Prime Minister is the chairperson of PM Cares Fund. And certain very important ministers act as trustees for the trust in their ex officio capacity, meaning not permanent member. And that includes Defence Minister, Home Minister, and Finance Minister. And similar to PM Cares Fund, there is another fund called as Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. And when PM Cares Fund was being formulated, the point was raised as to why a new fund when we already have Prime Minister National Relief Fund. Well, there is a slight difference. The basic nature of the fund is very similar, but I'll give you what that slight difference is. First of all, Prime Minister National Relief Fund was formed by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in 1948. The purpose was to assist the displaced persons from Pakistan. But now this purpose has outlived its life, so the fund is utilized primarily to tackle natural calamities. Prime Minister National Relief Fund is also registered as a trust. And here as well, donations are eligible for 100% deduction from taxable income. Prime Minister's National Relief Fund is also not audited by CAG. But the thing is that Prime Minister's National Relief Fund is managed by the Prime Minister, in a sense that disbursements are made with approval of Prime Minister. And this differentiates PM Cares Fund with this fund. Although Prime Minister is the chairman, but the utilization of the fund is not with the approval of Prime Minister. The management of fund is done by Under Secretary to the Government of India. And he is said to be discharging that function on an honorary basis, without remuneration. But you understand that Prime Minister of India cannot be working on an honorary basis. So here, there is involvement of a state. Crystal clear. So, CIC directed the Prime Minister National Relief Fund to disclose information under RTI Act after Delhi High Court's judgment on this. Although the judgment was not unanimous, it was the split opinion of the judges. But still after the judgment, CIC ordered that Prime Minister National Relief Fund will come under RTI. But we have seen that elaborately, Government of India has given reason as to why PM Cares will not come under RTI. So PM Cares, as per the opinion of the central government, cannot be declared as public authority. Let's quickly understand what a public authority is. See, RTI Act was considered as a watershed moment in the governance structure in India. It was meant to usher transparency in governance. Public authorities were supposed to give information as and when people seek from them. The Act also encourages public authority to proactively put information in public domain. There are provisions of record keeping so that information can be easily given when demanded. And there are provisions of punishment for officers who are responsible for giving information when they fail to do so. But however, the entire RTI Act hence depends on how clearly an organization can be declared as public authority. If organizations cannot be clearly declared as public authority, then the entire purpose of RTI Act will get diluted. You must remember for your prelims examination, it is the section 2H of RTI Act that defines public authority. It says public authority means any authority or body or institution of self-government established or constituted under the Constitution. So all constitutional bodies, public authority. Or if these bodies are established or constituted under any law of the parliament or any law of the state legislature. Public authority also includes any body owned, controlled, or substantially financed by government. Public authority also includes non-government organizations if they are substantially financed, directly or indirectly by funds provided by government. Now let's apply this criteria on PM Cares. PM Cares is not a constitutional body, it's not a statutory body under any law of parliament or state legislature. And it is not a non-governmental organization substantially financed directly or indirectly by government, because the funds come from private individuals and institutions. So it is not substantially financed by Government of India. So no, this criteria also does not fit. If at all PM Cares become public authority, it can only be done within the scope of section 2HD1. Previously, Bombay High Court has declared that these three criteria mentioned in section 2HD1, owned, controlled, or substantially financed, have not all to be fulfilled. Even if one criteria gets fulfilled, then the body can be declared as public authority. See, substantially financed, it is not. Owned, it is not. So the only thing that can make PM Care as a public authority is this portion of section 2HD1. It's this word controlled. If it is controlled by government, it can be declared as public authority. So we'll have a little bit of discussion as to whether it seems like Government of India is controlling PM CARES fund or if that is not the case. But before that, a quick discussion on state versus public authority. See, in MP Varghese versus Mahatma Gandhi University, it was observed by the court that definition of public authority has much wider meaning than that of a state under Article 12. There are many, many more bodies that can come under the wider concept of public authorities, but of course, they will not form part of the state. For example, NGOs can also become public authority, but NGOs will not be part of the state. Supreme Court of India has declared Board of Control for Cricket in India, BCCI, as not to be part of the state, nor it will be public authority. But Indian Olympic Association, this is public authority. You know why? Because 85% of expenses, travel expense and other of the athletes, that is borne by Government of India. So it is substantially financed. So it is public authority. It may also be the case that an organization is declared as a state under Article 12, but nonetheless it is unfit to be called as a public authority. One typical example was one of the leading news channel, Sabse Tez. Delhi High Court fined the channel for violating the right to privacy of certain individuals. Right to privacy is a fundamental right. Fundamental right is guaranteed against state. So if you are enforcing the right to privacy or fundamental right of a citizen against an institution, that institution by definition has to be part of the state. So in that judgment, the news channel was considered as part of the state for fundamental right to be enforced. But the news channel is not substantially funded by government. It is not controlled by the government, owned by the government. So it cannot be declared as public authority. The definition of a state comes from Article 12. And Article 12 defines the state primarily to enforce fundamental rights. But the definition of public authorities comes from the RTI Act, the purpose of which is to effectuate the right to information guaranteed under Article 19 of Constitution. So you have understood the difference between state and public authority. You also have understood when an institution can be declared as public authority. So you have understood the difference between state PM CARES cannot be declared as public authority. The argument seems to suggest that there is no government control. The Undersecretary is managing the fund on honorary basis. The Board of Trustees, that is not a determinative factor to ascertain whether the respondent is a public authority or not. But if the court sees these same very points as suggesting that Government of India is having control, then by virtue of Section 2HD1, PM CARES can be declared as public authority. If you see clause 5.3 of the trust deed of PM CARES trust, it says there is no control of either the central government or any state government, either directly or indirectly, in the functioning of the trust in any manner whatsoever. So it has been stated that the government has no control whatsoever. However, there are certain arguments that have been put forward to suggest that government has control over PM CARES trust, and by virtue of that, it can be declared as public authority. See, in Pradeep Kumar Biswas versus Indian Institute of Chemical Biology case, the Supreme Court held that if government has a dominant role to play in terms of power to appoint the secretary or to nominate and terminate the members of the governing board, then it is said to have control over the body. So although the entire trustee and the board members are not appointed by Government of India, but Prime Minister himself heads it, and prominent ministers, Defence Minister, Finance Minister, Home Minister are ex officio trustees, and an Undersecretary or the Principal Secretary of Government of India manages the fund. So it must best be left to the wisdom of the court to interpret this judgment of Supreme Court and see if it is suitable in case of PM CARES. It also has been pointed out that the government secretaries who are holding positions of trustees, they are not just the ceremonial heads as generally the ex officio members are, but the entire management and administration of the fund are in their hands. You must also be aware that the PM CARES fund is housed under PMO. It does not have its own separate physical infrastructure. So there is no separate expenditure to run the fund. All the expenditure incurred on its management is borne by PMO. And the management of the fund, of course, is also done by PMO officials, but on honorary basis. PM CARES fund also uses the state emblem of Sarnath lion capital of Ashoka as its logo. Further, the official domain govt.in, which is reserved for government departments and agencies, is also used for PM cares. So the other side of the argument is that the government has substantial control over the fund, and hence, by the virtue of Section 2HD1, it must be declared as public authority. You must be aware of arguments on both sides, but you must make your mind when the judgment of Delhi High Court, and if appealed in the Supreme Court, finally comes out. To conclude the topic, I'll use what Jeremy Bentham has said. Jeremy Bentham was an economist. He was a philosopher of utilitarian school of thought, as you must already have read about him in GS paper 4. He was also a jurist, a legal reformer. He said that a secret policy saves itself from some inconveniences I will not deny. But I believe that in the long run, it creates more than it avoids. Meaning it creates more inconveniences than it avoids. And two of the government, one of which should be conducted secretly and other openly, the latter would possess a strength, a hardihood, a reputation, which would render it superior to all the dissimulations of the other. In short, governments that works openly has more utility than governments that work secretly. When the PM Care Fund is already audited, when the information is already put on the website, why this resistance to not bring it under RTI? There is an article on page number 1, Caste Census of Backward Classes Difficult. Center tells Supreme Court. Actually, the center has made it clear that in the census of 2021, caste census of OBCs will not be included. Let's have a discussion on caste census from the exam point of view. This topic is important for the coming mains. Let's look at the brief history of caste data in census in India. And then we'll come to the point as to should it be included in the census of 2021. The first synchronous census happened in 1881. Before 1881, census was conducted between 1865 to 1871. The data was released in 1872. But ever since 1881, census were conducted every 10 years in a synchronous manner, meaning simultaneously in the entire country. But census data always had few questions on caste. The purpose to include the data on caste was mischievous. The aim was to divide the society and conquer. However, properly socio-economic caste census was done in 1931, and this was the last time census had data on caste. In 1941, caste-based data were collected, but it was not published. So the era of caste-based data through census was over in 1931 itself. In 1941, the Census Commissioner said that the time is past for the enormous and costly table as part of central undertaking, meaning they were not to collect and release the caste-based data through census anymore. Perhaps the purpose was already fulfilled. The Union of India after independence decided as a matter of policy to not include the caste data population-wise other than that of SCs and STs. This stand of central government is unequivocally clear. Recently, Minister has said on the floor of Parliament that it is a matter of policy to not collect and release caste data through census other than that of SCs and STs. You know the percentage of SCs and STs in India, don't you? How do you know that? Because that is released through the census. So the question of collecting caste-based data is only for OBCs. For SC and ST, it is done already. This was the last one before independence. After independence, all the census that has been conducted since 1951 to 2011 has published data on scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, but the largest caste block, the other backward classes, OBCs, data on them have not been collected and hence not released. So we do not have a proper estimate of OBCs, and we don't at all have proper estimate of subgroups within OBCs. Things continued till 1979 when Mandal Commission, formerly called as Socially and Educationally Backward Classes Commission, suggested expansion of affirmative action, reservation, to include OBCs. But then the last updated data on caste or OBCs was that of 1931. And as per the census, 52% of Indian population were OBCs. But there were demands for detailed data collection of OBCs and subclasses within OBCs. 10 years after release of Mandal Commission in 1990, The VP Singh government decided to implement the Mandal report. Government introduced a new class, other backward classes, and 27% reservation were given to OBCs. But the demand was of greater reservation. But since the official numbers were not available in the updated form, this could not have been done very objectively. So, since then, the demand always has been there to include OBC data in the decennial census. In 2010, UPA government decided to go for a full-fledged socio-economic caste census. However, after completion of the census, only economic data of urban and rural population were released. The caste-based data were withheld. There are various reasons for this. There were opposition by certain states also. There was not much confidence in the process of data collection. Now, with the arrival of time for census of 2021, a fresh demand has appeared to include the caste data in the census. Let's talk about the benefit of doing a caste-based census. The last caste-based census was done in 1931. So a caste-based census now, after around 90 years, will do good in understanding the changes that has happened in our society, because caste is a reality in Indian society. It's a way of life. We must know about our reality of existence. It will also do good to the cause of understanding changes that has happened in the society in last 1 century. Caste-based data will also help one understand the caste-based political decisions. And unnecessarily, all political decisions will not be muted as caste-based political decisions. Caste-based data will objectively identify the backward and downtrodden classes. Then government programs, schemes, and policies can be directed better for these downtrodden classes. How will you follow the policy of unto the last, Antodaya, unless you know the last person in the society, the most downtrodden class? Indian government actually runs many programs based on caste. There are various schemes and initiatives for backward classes. So it's paradoxical that the central government has a stated policy stance of not collecting and releasing caste-based data. Caste-based data will also touch upon the elephant in the room, reservation policy. It will help rationalize it. We have various evidences to show that marginalization, backwardness, does not happen in few castes exclusively. It has been suggested by some data that because of rising rural wages, particularly construction wages, and social security schemes run by government, many Dalits and also many OBCs are now in better position. National sample survey data also shows that poverty persists among forward castes as well. National Council for Applied Economics conduct India Human Development Survey. According to the survey, 56% of Dalit children aged between 8 and 11 cannot read. But the same is true for 32% of forward caste and 47% of other backward classes. You cannot enforce the principle of equity unless you know the differences in the society. The 50% reservation cap that has been imposed by Supreme Court is also considered arbitrary because there is no data to back this up. Recently, people have been demanding reservation for their own community, like Jats in Haryana, Marathas in Maharashtra, Kakpus in Andhra Pradesh, Gujjars in Rajasthan, Patidas in Gujarat. All these reservation demands can either be met or rejected very objectively in a transparent manner if we have caste-based data. Also, within OBC, it's necessary to ensure equal representation. And that is why National Commission for Backward Classes has urged the government to collect data on various subclasses of OBC in the coming census. See, the question is, if it has so much of benefit, then why it is being opposed? Why the central government does not accept it? Why the central government has a policy of not collecting caste-based census data? Although the government has not given reason for this, but the obvious answer one can think of is that it will strengthen the institution of caste in India. Not that we do not want the institution of caste, but we do not want it to be developed in an exclusive manner. We do not want caste to be seen as a homogeneous classifiable units, where each unit start competing with the other in social, economic, political sphere in an unhealthy competition. The caste-based politics that we see in India might further get promoted. Caste-based politics in India is a reality. Last time, you remember at the time of Karnataka election, the Lingayat issue was raked up. During election time in Haryana, the Jat issues comes to the fore. Similarly, in different regions in India and different states, different caste issues come to the fore at opportune time. And historically, we know the games that were being played using the caste data in the census. It is also suggested by some that the anti-Brahminical movement that started in the 20th century were based on these caste-based census data. So we do not understand very well the dynamics of caste-based census that will play out in the society. And that's why the hesitation is there. But this is an unsettled issue in the Indian polity, and you must have an opinion as to what should be the way ahead. Think about it and put that in the comment section. There are two more articles in today's newspaper which are important for the exam, but they have been covered already. One is the editorial article on AUKUS, and another is based on the opportunity that India has to steer a climate change narrative in the COP26 meeting that is going to happen in Glasgow. These two topics has been covered in the previous DNS, the link to which will be provided in the description section. Now, time for the test. I'll speak out the statement and you have to tell me if those statements are true or false. Section 2H of RTI Act is related to public authority. This is important section of RTI that is making round in news again and again, so you must know. The statement is true. Public authorities under RTI Act are part of a state as defined by Article 12. Public authorities is a larger concept. The scope of public authorities is much wider than that of state. The statement is absolutely incorrect. Donations to PM CARES Fund can avail 100% tax exemption. This is a true statement, and donations to Prime Minister National Relief Fund are also eligible for 100% tax exemption. Statement 4 is foreign contribution is allowed for PM CARES but not for Prime Minister National Relief Fund. Well, why not? In case you do not know statements like this in the exam, then with general reasoning and logic, go with your intuition. If it is allowed for PM CARES, it doesn't make much sense to not allow it for Pradhan Mantri National Relief Fund. In fact, it is allowed for Prime Minister National Relief Fund as well. The statement is false. Prime Minister National Relief Fund is audited by CAG, but PM CARES Fund is not. PM CARES Fund is not audited by CAG, this is correct. But PM NRF is also not audited by CAG. The statement becomes false. Both PM CARES and Prime Minister National Relief Fund is managed by Prime Minister. See, here is a thin line of difference between PM CARES and PM NRF. PM NRF is managed by Prime Minister, but one of the secretary to the Government of India manages PM CARES. So in the opinion of the court, government has control over PM NRF, but the secretary is working on the honorary basis, so PM CARES, so we have to wait and see in the wisdom of court, will PM CARES be declared as public authority? But the statement is incorrect. PM CARES is housed in the Niti Aayog, absolutely incorrect. It is housed at PMO. Defense Minister, Home Minister, Finance Minister are trustees of PM CARES Fund in their ex officio capacity. This is factual and correct statement, also an important one for your exam. But you have to remember that PM CARES, although is not managed by the Prime Minister, but Prime Minister is the chairman of PM CARES. Unique Identification Authority of India can be considered as a public authority under RTI Act. Yes, of course, either it has to be managed, controlled, or substantially financed by the government. So UIDI, of course, will be public authority. Cooperative societies are public authorities under RTI Act. See, cooperative societies are regulated by the government, but it is not managed, controlled, or substantially financed by the government. So cooperative societies cannot be considered as public authority. A university getting grant of 10% necessarily comes under the ambit of RTI Act. See, if it's a private university, then definitely it is not owned or controlled by the government. But if it is substantially financed, then it can be declared as public authority. Delhi High Court has interpreted the expression substantially financed as financing to the extent without which the body or institution cannot function. And 10% does not seem to be that very high. So it will not necessarily come under RTI Act. BCCI in India has been held by the court to be part of a state. This is absolutely incorrect. BCCI cannot be considered as part of the state, but still Supreme Court has interfered in the working of BCCI, considering this as an institution of national importance. Indian Olympic Association is a public authority. So the issue is that this body is substantially financed to the extent of 85% by Government of India. So it will be counted as public authority. The first census in India happened in 1881. You see, the first census result were declared in 1872, and census happened in a sporadic manner even before that. So the statement is incorrect. Last OBC caste census was done in 1931 census. This is a factual statement and very, very important statement. Caste census are still done for SC/ST, and caste census for OBC was done till 1931. The caste census data were also collected in 1941 census exercise, but it was never made public. So the last caste census data of OBCs that we have is of 1931. And this data to a certain extent were utilized in implementing the Mandal Commission recommendation. US has planned to have a common charging port for mobile phones, tablets and earphones, for mobile phones, tablets and other gadgets like headphones. You see, in today's newspaper on page number 11, you'll find an article, EU plans one mobile charging port for all. So it is not the US, but the European Union that has this in offing since 1 decade. But the Union were going easy on industries, hoping that they will collaborate, coordinate, and come with a plan of their own. But since that has not happened, now the European Union is serious about coming up with a regulation on that. Not very important for your exam, but definitely important for your daily life. You must have been fed up with requirement of multiple charges for your different gadgets. European Union has a plan of making USB-C connector as the standard port for all smartphones, tablets, cameras, headphones, portable speakers, and other similar gadgets. This will have great environmental benefit because obviously the number of chargers per person will decrease and the e-waste will decrease enormously. So it's EU, not the US. The statement is false. Among Deepsang Plain, Galwan Valley, Pangong Lake, and Hot Spring Gogra region, Pangong Lake is the easternmost. See, Deepsang Plain basically in this region. Galwan Valley is here. This is Pangong Lake. In the northern portion of Pangong Lake, we have 8 fingers. And as you move towards northeast of Pangong Lake, in this region around, you have the Gogra region. You have an article in today's newspaper saying that farmers are facing problem accessing certain grazing land in the Gogra region. Among these 4, if you see the easternmost should be the Pangong Lake, because Pangong Lake does not end here. It's a trans-boundary lake and it extends to China as well. So obviously you will consider the entire lake, not just that region that lies in India. So Pangong Lake is the easternmost. The statement is correct. Now please come up in the comment section and tell me what's your score. Now you have in front of you today's question of the day. The answer to yesterday's question of the day is option C. Please attempt the question, mark your answer in the comment section, and also try to attempt the DNS quiz on the ELEARN platform. Goodbye. Take care.